incorporating the gas phase filtration, some of the techniques that we can use, and with everything that's evolving and changing, I think everyone's gonna get a lot out of it. So Dave, I'm gonna hand it over to you and let you get started.
All right, thanks, Matt. So bear with me and I will start the presentation. Okay, here we go. So today's agenda, gonna roll through the kind of the problem statement. I think that's pretty obvious, but maybe just introduce some facts that everyone's maybe not aware of. A little background on wildfires for people that know it's an issue, but maybe not how big of an issue it is. Then the main focus of the presentation is ASHRAE GPC 44 guidance. I'm currently on that committee, and I'll tell you about what we've been working on there, and look at a couple of case studies from the EPA, and then kind of wrap it all up with some additional resources if you want to look for further information on the topic. So the problem statement, starting off over on the right-hand side of the page. Obviously, I think everyone's well aware that the frequency and magnitude of wildland fires is increasing. Just look at a couple weeks ago, for example. And these wildfire events, again, just looking at a couple weeks while it's fresh in everybody's mind. I mean, sometimes it can just be a day, it can be a couple of day event, can be weeks, and even there's been some that are months at a time. I'm sure everybody's seen this on TV if you haven't experienced it personally. And the issue is obviously it's bad outdoor air, but then that bad outdoor air also infiltrates our indoor environment. Makes the indoor air worse than the outdoor air. And most public guidance that's been around says just stay inside and close all the windows and doors. And that's easier said than done because, it gets pretty stuffy inside a house with no air moving. So hopefully what we're going to do today is cover some ways that you can stay inside, but also maybe provide a better environment for yourself. And then that last bullet there, we're just talking about, there's obviously health impacts associated with wildfire smoke. And over on the left side of the screen is what some of those impacts are. Obviously, you can reduce air quality. That's pretty much a given. Also can impact water quality. There's lots of public health issues, personal health issues. The four I've got listed there are some of the more prevalent issues that get that people with those conditions makes it even worse, harder to breathe. There's the economic impact. Obviously, you've got people that maybe stay at home, aren't going to work. You've got the firefighters out there. You've got whatever gets burned down, you have to replace it. And then from an environmental standpoint, you've got the damage to the ecosystem. So I think all these things are pretty self-explanatory, but just want to throw those out there. So this is a chart I've borrowed just to kind of put it in a dollar figure. This is from the U.S. Forest Service going back for the last 7 years, looking at the number of fires. And in case until I started researching this, I had no idea, but I mean, we average somewhere between 58 and 71,000 forest fires over the last 7 years, which is just an incredible number. And the next column over shows how many acres were impacted by those fires. Again, just a staggering number. And then the last column shows what that cost came out to be. And so, the 7-year total, we've spent, look at that number, $14 billion, over almost $15 billion on the impact of wildfires. So big problem. And this was something interesting I ran across. I mean, I think everybody would say wildfires aren't a new problem, but I wasn't aware that they went back this far. In 1895, Mark Twain was visiting the Puget Sound. He was on a lecture tour, and anybody knows anything about Mark Twain, obviously quite a character, and he was quite enraged because the people that were supposed to show up for his lecture were late. And it turns out it was because there was a major forest fire in the area. And when he left Puget Sound, his ship ran aground because they couldn't see where they were going. And that quote over there, I love this quote from him. I'll let everybody just kind of read it for themselves. You know, he was a big cigar smoker, so he was accustomed to smoke, but he was saddened to see all the forests that were being destroyed by the fire. So just a little anecdote there on forest fires and going back to the prior to 1900. And obviously, just 2 weeks ago, we had an issue. Myself and a lot of other people. I live on the East Coast, and I think a lot of people like to think, well, this is a West Coast phenomenon. Clearly, it was not 2 weeks ago. On the picture on the left, I just took a snippet off the Weather Channel showing where the smoke was going to be, and you can see just how many states were impacted by that, which is very rare for us here on the East Coast. And then over on the right side is the air now fire and smoke map, which I'll touch on at the end. But you could see where all the forest fires are at that given day, or the smoke issues were, and it was predominantly on the East Coast for a change. So obviously it's not just a West Coast phenomenon. And then if you're not concerned yet, this will strike fear in your heart. According to UC Berkeley, they predict that 94% of California cannabis cultivation is at risk from wildfires by the end of this century. So clearly need to try to do what we can to prevent these, but obviously they're going to happen. And so here's an example. 2018, the Camp Fire. In case anybody's not familiar with this, the road was called Camp Fire Road, as I recall. That's where it got its name. That's where it started. I believe it was from a electrical wire starting it. And it's the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in U.S. history. Over 153,000 acres were impacted and over 18,000 structures were destroyed. So just a huge fire. Hopefully we never have one that bad again. But to the right, you can kind of see captured what exactly the impact was of that. So the left-hand axis is PM 2.5 that was measured during that time, and the right axis is just the date. You can see it stretches out about 25 days. So there were PM 2.5 readings prior to about November 7th or 8th, and they were all below the EPA 24-hour limit, which is 35 micrograms per cubic meter. And then you can see around the 8th, when the fire started, you can see what happened. You can see the PM 2.5 that was in the air and how it was from, let's say, the 8th all the way down there to maybe the 23rd, 24th. So that's about 3 weeks of impact of just excessively high PM 2.5 in the air. So we all know that smoke is outdoors because you can see it when it happens. But that smoke enters the building. This is where it impacts all of us that are on this call. And sometimes it comes in through natural ventilation, sometimes just through infiltration of the building structure, and then through mechanical ventilation. Like I mentioned earlier, the prevailing theory has always been just go inside and shut everything down. But obviously that's not practical, particularly if it's in the summer when it's really hot and you need some air conditioning going. So the mechanical ventilation can even draw in that smoke. That's a pretty obvious statement, I would hope. So what is actually coming inside? What is this wildfire smoke made up of? Well, it's made up of mostly, the vast majority of the smoke is actually solid particulate matter. And of that particulate matter, up to 90%, just kind of depends on the fire, up to 90% is PM 2.5. So pretty much everything I'm going to present the rest of this presentation focuses on PM 2.5. Is going to talk about 2.5 since that's 90% of the issue. There are also gas phase contaminants associated with wildfire smoke. And you can see the list there of typical contaminants that are found in that smoke. There can be others. And it just kind of depends on, is it just the trees that are burning? You can imagine if a building's burning, or, God forbid, a chemical plant or something like that, there could be other gas phase components to that smoke, but these are some of the more common ones. So in 2018, realized this is getting to be a little old, about 5 years old, but this is a really good study that was done on healthcare facilities, just talking to people about what they do or what they've done to prevent wildfire smoke from getting into their facilities. And so 17% of the people that they interviewed said didn't matter what they did, they didn't show any improvement in IAQ. 41% of the people tried different things, not shutting it down completely, but reducing how much outdoor air they brought in, tried changing out filters. 57% of those people said that doing that didn't really reduce the IAQ complaints that they were getting. And so, whether you can see 57% said they didn't reduce IAQ complaints and 17% said it didn't improve IAQ. So, obviously, even if you were improving IAQ, you still may have people that are complaining whether it's actually measurable or not. So, whether it's an actual problem or perceived problem, it's a problem. And 60% of the people surveyed said that the new filters they put in to try to get higher levels of filtration actually reduced the overall airflow of their HVAC system, which makes sense because the better filters typically had a higher pressure drop. And then the worst number here is 100%. 100% can be good or bad. In this case, it's bad. 100% of the people surveyed didn't have any kind of plan of, okay, there's a wildfire event, what do I do? So we're going to talk about how you can rectify that. So in 2020, the EPA, realizing these wildfires weren't going away and were becoming a bigger issue, worked with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, to propose that ASHRAE develop some wildfire smoke guidance of some sort. So a multidisciplinary team was identified in July of 2020. I was part of that team. I've been working on this committee since then. It's made up of several filter industry personnel, a lot of some consulting and application engineers, and then the bulk of our committee is made up of people from Canada and the U.S. with EPA and who work on air quality. That's their primary job. And so in February of 2021, ASHRAE said, we know this is going to take a while, but we need to get something out there quicker. So they asked if we could throw out some interim guidance, and that was issued in 2021. And then we've been continuing to work on the standard. And as of this week, in fact, this is very timely, we're just voting to whether or not to put out the first draft for publication. The way the voting's going so far, spoiler alert, looks like it's going to go out. So you'll probably see this out for publication after the June meeting, which is starts this weekend and goes into next week down in Tampa. So the ASHRAE, the interim guidance that was put out, like I mentioned before, with PM 2.5 being the primary culprit, really focuses on how can you reduce PM 2.5 exposure inside, as opposed to outside. And hopefully you'll find this when you read it, that it includes a lot of information for building owners and operators, how to develop a smoke readiness plan. Because remember, I just said 100% of those people surveyed in 2018 didn't have a plan. So that's really key. That's the heart of the guidance, is you have to have a plan. And then once you have a plan, part of that plan should be being prepared to have the supplies on hand, having procedures in place to deal with it. Then knowing when to implement that plan and the measures that are part of your plan. And then equally important facet is to monitor the effectiveness of your plan. So you implement it, but maybe something's changed. And so you need to continually monitor that to make sure that your plan is doing what's intended to do. And we'll talk about this some more coming up here. So actions to take in advance. This is all part of that guidance. Most of these are pretty straightforward and pretty logical, I think, but maybe everybody doesn't think of them. So the first thing is make sure you have supplies early. Make sure you have filters you need, because you might be changing out filters weekly or even daily during an event, depending on where you are. Make sure you have portable air cleaners if you need them. And we'll talk more about portable air cleaners as we go through this presentation. This is a big one. Evaluate your HVAC system. Can it handle a higher efficiency filter that may have a higher pressure drop? And when you do that, one of the things we talk about in here is we recommend, you'll see we talk about different MERV filters, in particular like a MERV 13 filter, which was a big filter upgrade during COVID. And maybe you upgrade your HVAC system and put that higher efficiency filter in it, and as it loads up, it may affect the airflow from your HVAC system. But what we tell people is it'd be better to have that filter in place for some amount of time to filter out more of the particulate than just to stay with your older, lower efficiency filter the whole time. You just may have to change the filter out. I know it's easy for me to say because I work for a filter company, but you may have to change that filter out before it's fully loaded so you don't reduce the airflow. So just keep that in mind. Review your building envelope, weatherize it as needed to make sure you're cutting down on potential paths for infiltration. Always conduct a full maintenance check on the system, make any repairs. You can see a picture on the left there. There's a damper that's supposed to be closed, but it's not. So, if it's a system where you're going to shut down the outdoor air damper, you want to make sure that the damper fully closes and the seals are good. You want to be able to check the ability to reduce that outdoor air and maintain positive pressure. That's another key to this. If your building's under positive pressure, then if anything, your air inside is going to try to get to the outside, as opposed to if it's under negative pressure and you're trying to suck some of that smoke into the building. Look at supplemental filtration, and we'll talk about this some more. I'll show you some pictures. See if you can add more filtration, whether it's air cleaners or do-it-yourself air cleaners, or can you add another filter on the intake, whatever it takes to get more filtration into the system to filter out all this PM 2.5. And then if you don't feel comfortable doing everything I've mentioned above, then we highly recommend consulting with the HVAC professional and get some guidance. It's not the worst thing to have somebody, a fresh set of eyes, come in and look at your building, look at your system. And then what I said before about monitoring it, there's a lot of very inexpensive PM 2.5 sensors on the market. So install sensors. I'll talk more about this in a minute, but install sensors just to make sure that your plan is actually working, and then make adjustments based on what your sensors are showing. During an actual event, obviously you want to change out your filters regularly and not let them get to the point of that one. And so, like I said before, make sure you've got supplies on hand of filters and air cleaners and whatever else you have detailed in your plan. Conduct periodic checks. Don't just what you checked everything when maybe right before this event started or when the event started, but conduct weekly or monthly periodic maintenance checks as needed to make sure everything's still working as it should. Limited amount of outdoor air. Again, it's always easier said than done, but that's where the smoke is. So the more you can cut that down, the less smoke that you're going to be bringing into the building. Add supplemental filtration, like we just mentioned before. Utilize MERV 13 filters or better. And like I said last slide, if you can't leave it in till it's fully loaded, that's fine, but at least you're getting that higher MERV rating and you're filtering out more of that PM 2.5. And then utilize combination particulate and gas phase filters. Over the last couple of years, gas phase filters have been increasing in MERV rating, and there are plenty of MERV 13, 14, 15 combination gas phase and particulate filters. So you can remove that PM 2.5, but also take out some of the odors that I mentioned earlier. Monitoring, I said this was important. It is very important. And so we recommend monitoring the PM 2.5 concentration in the building as a given. And then if you also take a look at it, if it's easy to access, you might want to monitor it at air intakes. Then you can take a look and see, okay, this is what air is coming in the building. Here's what it is actually in the building, and see if your plan's working. We recommend that you install as many sensors as possible, especially in your higher occupancy areas, or if it's a healthcare facility, where your most critical patients might be. You want to try to monitor as much of the air inside as possible. But if obviously everybody's going to have a limited budget. So make sure you're getting the most critical areas, and then use that as an assumption for how the rest of your building's doing if you have to limit that. Also recommend, in addition to the PM 2.5 sensors, that you also use differential pressure sensors. Like I said on the last slide and 2 slides ago, you want to try to maintain positive pressure in the building if possible. Obviously, not all healthcare and not all applications will allow you to do that, but measure the pressure in the space and see how that's doing, and try to protect yourself from infiltration. Let's talk a little bit about filter efficiency. So I just mentioned about trying to upgrade to MERV 13 filters. So this is just a little chart showing MERV 8. That's pretty much typical of what we see if somebody just wants to put in a filter in an HVAC system and doesn't specify it. That's what most manufacturers will provide today. Sometimes it's higher than that, but that's pretty typical what we see. And then you can see below that is what we recommend for MERV 13. And then going across, you can see what the particle size efficiency is for each one of those. And in case you weren't aware of it, you can see MERV 13 is just leaps and bounds better than MERV 8 for removing particulate, especially that small particulate. And a little note down below there, if you fail to upgrade from 8 to 13, maybe you can't, so you just got to make do with what you have. But if you can and you choose not to, that means that potentially you could have up to 80% of that PM 2.5 that's going to pass through the filter and get into your occupied space. So we highly recommend upgrading to at least MERV 13 where possible. And then the other thing is, not only do you need to upgrade the filter, you want to upgrade as high as you can. The 13's a minimum, but if you can upgrade to HEPA or somewhere between 13 and a HEPA or ULPA, that's great. But then also you need to make sure the side access, a filter rack or whatever your filters are mounted in, does not have any bypass, because your filtration is only going to be as good as your lack of bypass. If you have MERV 13 filters, but there's gaps between the filters or gaps between filters and block offs, then that air is going to get around it and you're not going to really have MERV 13 filter. So where possible, upgrade the filters to make sure your filters and your filter racks are in good condition. Supplemental filtration, I mentioned this before. So picture on the left is what somebody did. They didn't have any more space anywhere to add supplemental filter, so they just duct tape some to the outdoor air hood on the unit. Is that the best thing to do? Probably not, but in a pinch, it's better than doing nothing. They've added some more filtration to try to protect the people inside the building. I'm going to skip over and go to the far right. There's some do-it-yourself filters. Anybody that's not familiar with these, all you have to do is Google it, and you will see more and more of these case studies, articles on these with every passing day. And that's just taking a simple box fan and attaching a filter to it. One on the bottom, just a box fan with one filter. And then on the top is a four-sided filter. So you've got even more filter face area with the box fan attached to it on the top. And you can see some little spacers so the air can get underneath that as well. So these things, these do-it-yourself filters, again, it's better than doing nothing. But the Cadillac for supplemental filtration would be something like the unit in the middle, which is a portable HEPA air filter. So that unit would have multiple stages of filtration. It'd have 1 or 2 stages of pre-filtration, and then the last stage of filtration would be a HEPA filter, or could possibly even be an ULPA filter. And those, and I'll show you some actual data on the use of those in just a minute, but those can make a huge difference for removing the particulate matter that gets into the space and keeping the air cleaner. If you choose to go the do-it-yourself air cleaner route, that's totally up to you. That's your prerogative. There are several different studies out there that can give you some guidance. There's the article there on the left where somebody was looking at do-it-yourself air cleaners for helping prevent COVID. It's a very interesting read. There's the study in the middle there, and then there's also a study on the right that Underwriter Laboratory did because the concern a lot of people had when people started strapping filters to box fans was, are you going to overheat that motor on the box fan and create a fire? And surprisingly, the UL testing shows that that's not the case. But I would encourage you to look at any of these documents or other documents online before you decide to do something like that. But if that's all you can do, again, anything you do is better than doing nothing. So let's look at a case study here. This Pacific Northwest lab did this study in 2020, and this was a residence, so somebody's house. And up until that time on the left, they measured the PM 2.5 level outside the house and inside the house. And as you can see, luckily, inside the house was lower than outside of the house, considerably lower, which is good news. And then when they switched on the portable air cleaner, the levels got even lower inside the house. You can see that the inside levels pretty well track the outside levels. When there's a spike outside, there tends to be a spike inside, but in general, inside is lower. And with that portable air cleaner, it kept the particulate concentrations down even lower, even though if you look to the right of that, you'll notice the outside levels of PM 2.5 after September 16th were lower than before, but still you can see it made a difference. That's the important thing. And then here's an example of where instead of just using a portable air cleaner, somebody used one of those portable HEPA filter units like I showed 2 slides ago. And the top line is the outdoor PM 2.5 average again, and then the bottom line, the orange one, is inside, and you can see inside was tracking below outside for the most part, following along, and then right there where it says HEPA filters installed, some portable HEPA filter units were installed, and you can see it all but flatlined. It removed pretty much all of the particulate. This was a preschool daycare building that was constructed in 2010, so it's not like it's a brand new building that was constructed very tight, just probably a very typical building. It had a central HVAC system. It wasn't optimized for smoke control, so nothing else was changed. All they did was look at that last bullet point, is during days when there was smoke outside, they closed the doors and windows as much as possible, and they used these portable air cleaners, and you can see the difference that it made. Big difference. So when it comes to portable air cleaner, kind of like when I was talking about the do-it-yourself filters, not every portable air cleaner is the same. The Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, or AHAM, they've got a rating system for these. So if you're going to go that route, I would go to them and follow their guidance for sizing one and selecting one. Make sure that it's AHAM certified. You see the little label there on the right. Not too recent, well, fairly recently, after they've developed the guideline and talked about the clean air delivery rate for air cleaners in general, they came out with a new rating because they knew they needed to do something with wildfire smoke. And so that 1, 2, 3, that 4th bullet point down tells you if you're using one of these for wildfire smoke, trying to clean that up, that they recommend a clean air delivery rate equal to the size of the room in square feet, using 2/3 of the room area rule of thumb. So you basically want to oversize that so you can get even more, a bit higher clean air delivery rate, because you realize you're going to have higher particulate loading in the room. And you can find a lot of guidance. In addition to AHAM, you can find guidance on the EPA website as well, and they have several articles talking about portable air cleaners. Okay, so let's look at a couple of case studies here. I'm going to show this graph several times. So first, this is just a base graph. This is the EPA put this together, and you can see across the bottom there's a bunch of different building types. Typical buildings you'd find in any city. The bar that are dark gray, that's during non-smoke weeks, and the blue bars are during a smoke week. And in particular, that was basically a 7-day full week, 7 days, September 13th through 19, 2020. And you can see the percent reduction just by whatever the HVAC system was doing. These were, they didn't have any advanced filtration or didn't do anything. This was just, all right, it's nice outside. Let's measure the particulate PM 2.5. All right, now we get a smoke event. Let's measure it and just see what it is. And you can see it's all over the place. This was all in the same town. It's all over the place. Some of these were higher than lower, or higher than others. Some are lower than others. Sometimes the smoke week, majority of times the smoke week is higher than the non-smoke week, but you'll see several of these where the gray bar, the non-smoke week, the PM 2.5 was actually higher on a non-smoke week. So let's talk about this a little bit more. If we start off with the orange, that fitness center and that preschool, those were the exact same building. The preschool was on the first floor and the fitness center was up on the second floor. And so you'll see, if you look at a lot of studies like this, you'll find out a lot of times that typically the higher up you are in the building, typically you'll find lower PM 2.5 during smoke events than the first floor. Not always, but typical. And that's what happened here. The preschool had a higher particulate loading with and without the smoke event going on than the fitness center. You also notice that in the magenta, the office building that's circled, big difference depending on what floor, again, of the office building. Those were two different floors of that office building. And then far right, circled in the green oval, that's a school. And you see that it's relatively close, both with the smoke event and not smoke event, but there are some subtle differences there. So, given different building types, different HVAC systems, all in the same event, you can see there's large difference in whether the HVAC system can provide any PM 2.5 reduction or not. Another thing to point out with this study, all of the, for the most part, all of these buildings had MERV 8 filtration. So that's why there wasn't more reduction going on with the PM matter. You'll see that one in the middle, that was MERV 11 plus. So I think somewhere MERV 11, somewhere MERV 13. And you can see, okay, yeah, there was some, that it really didn't do much compared to everything else. And that's where I said, the filter rating alone is not going to help. It's better than doing nothing, but if your filter system isn't leak tight, and if you're not doing the other things, if there's smoke still getting in, then you really haven't done anything to reduce that PM 2.5. So just adding the filters isn't the only ticket. We're going to talk in just a minute about, on the far left, you notice this was a church that had no HVAC system. And we're going to talk about that one in just a minute and talk about some of the things that happen with buildings like that. So this is that church. And if you look at this slide, you can see the dark blue, almost purple looking, is the PM 2.5 outside, and the magenta is inside. And I don't know if anything jumps out at you, but you'll notice early on there, over on the left-hand side, the air quality was worse during the smoke event than it was on the outside. And that's because it was a church. So they had sources of PM 2.5 and probably VOCs because they were lighting candles, incense. And so the PM 2.5 loading was actually worse inside than outside. Like I mentioned on the last slide, this church didn't have a HVAC system. I'm sure there's lots of churches and probably buildings like this all across the US. But you can see inside tracked much closer to the outside. I mean, it was, might as well not have had a building, might as well just been sitting outside for the most part. There's quite a bit of PM 2.5 getting in the building. And you can see when the smoke event got down into the moderate to good level, the PM 2.5, that magenta line, was still higher than the outdoor, again, from internally generated PM 2.5 mostly. So let's take a look at a smoke ready example. So in this example, this is a building. You can see follow along on the bullet points on the left. The HVAC system in this building had 7 rooftop air handling units with economizers and modulating outdoor air dampers. 5 of those 7 units just had MERV 8 filters, and 2 of them were considered advanced filtration units. They had a 3-stage filter. They had a MERV 8 pre-filter followed by a MERV 6 carbon filter. It had particulate and carbon in it, and then a MERV 14 final filter. And the plan for this building is, all right, if they have a wildfire event, they're going to close the outdoor air dampers on those units with the MERV 8 filters. The advanced filtration unit, one of them, is going to shut down no outdoor air. It's just going to recirculate air and clean it. And then the second unit, they'll modulate the outdoor air as needed to maintain positive building pressure. All the things I've been talking about: upgrading the filtration, keeping the building under positive pressure, reducing the amount of outside air that comes in. And you can see the results then over on the right, what happened. You can see the outside levels and the inside levels, and compared to that church, we get a much higher reduction in the PM 2.5 inside the space by having this smoke ready plan and executing it. So what's involved with the smoke ready plan? This is if you go and search for ASHRAE GPC 44 interim guidance on wildfire smoke, you can find this graphic. This is free download, but there's the steps you want to take before wildfire season. You can create your own checklist for your building, your residence, whatever. There's all the things I've already talked about, so I won't go through and read them all. Things you want to do ahead of wildfire season. Have all that in place. Then as you move left to right, these are things you want to do. Okay, you've got your plan in place. You want to make sure your HVAC systems is ready to go, and then get it in smoke ready mode. Then monitor, if you're not, whether it's the TV, it's airnow.gov, weather channel, whatever it takes to see, are there air quality alerts in your area where you need to implement your smoke readiness plan. And then if so, implement it. And like I've said several times now, monitor the effectiveness of it and adjust it as needed. Maybe you got it right out of the gate, 100%. That's great. But if not, don't feel bad about making adjustments as needed to keep that particulate matter out. And then make sure you stay in that smoke ready mode until the smoke subsides. And then this is just kind of that same thing, but kind of in a flow chart. So you have your smoke readiness plan starting up in the upper left-hand corner. You're testing your HVAC system. And then how did that turn out? Can you upgrade to MERV 13 filters? Can you maintain positive building pressure? And if the answer is no, then okay, maybe you can get by with MERV 11, maybe something, in between that's a little bit better. Or maybe it's, like I said before, that MERV 13, you just don't leave it until it's fully loaded, and then reevaluate the system. If everything if that doesn't work, then you may have to add additional filtration, such as portable air cleaners. Once you get that, then implement your smoke readiness plan. And then, like I've said, if I've said it once, I've probably said it a dozen times now, monitor it. What's the PM 2.5 value inside? Are you reducing it? If not, check your system, check the building envelope, check your filtration. And then once you get it right, if it's still reducing it, and if that's not working, then again, look at adding temporary portable air cleaners or having a clean air space in the building. And then hopefully, if all that works, then keep in that system and then continue to adjust and monitor it as you go. A couple of resources that I mentioned earlier. I said there'd be some resources here to talk about. The far left, that's the ASHRAE guidance, the planning framework. That's just the first page of it, but that's what it looks like. Canada, we have a couple people from Canada on the ASHRAE committee, and they have this brochure that you can download, guidance for cleaner airspaces during wildfire smoke events, which hopefully mirrors everything I've told you so far today. That's a very good document. And then a great resource is the EPA. If you go to the EPA and just search for wildfires, they have all kinds of guidance, articles, videos, recommendations for air cleaners, a little bit of everything on the EPA website. It's a great place to go. And then I mentioned this earlier, I had that screenshot and talked about monitoring the situation in your particular location, but go to fire.airnow.gov and it will show you what's going on, where wildfires are anywhere in the US at any given time. So you know if something might be coming your way or if something is in your backyard. It's a great resource. So that's basically everything I had to present. And so I believe we have time for questions, and I will attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, so thank you, Dave. Very informative. I hope everyone's taking notes on that. There's a lot of information there and some things that you can hopefully utilize moving forward, especially implementing a plan. There is a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, please submit them there and I'll bring them up to Dave as they come in. I do have quite a few already, so I'll try to get to as many as we can in our time frame here. And one of the things I just wanted to start out with was a question that was kind of asked a couple different ways, but with all these different conditions and recommendations for monitoring and tracking what's going on, is there any specific area that you want to put these monitors to kind of keep an eye on things?
Yeah, I think I think a lot probably depends on the building. If you have, and it depends on how many different HVAC systems, so there's probably not a one size fits all answer. But if you want to monitoring the outside air, so you know what's coming into the building, is good. And then probably either your most densely populated areas of the building or parts of the building where if it's a healthcare facility where you have critical patients, you'd want to measure there just to see what's going on in the space and see if your smoke readiness plan is actually working. If the sky's the limit, then put them in every occupied room or space that you have in the building, because like I showed, it can vary from space to space within the same building.
Great. Okay. I had a couple different questions on the AQI number that I think you referenced the air quality index a couple times here. Can you kind of explain what that actually is and I guess a little bit more layman's terms?
So that's an index that in theory is the amount of particulate corresponds to the amount of, say, particulate matter in the air and how that particulate matter correlates to air being healthy versus unhealthy. Obviously, the more particulate that's in the air or even gas phase contaminants, the less healthy air, especially the small particles that are easily get into your lungs and like to stay there. So it's a rating system, and if you go back and if you look at this material, you'll see how it correlates to different levels of particulate matter. You want to keep that in good, hopefully, or if not, moderate. But once it gets above moderate, it really starts to become unhealthy. The higher it goes, the more unhealthy it is. And even at those lower levels, it can mean that the air's unhealthier for people that are, say, immunocompromised, have some kind of a deficiency to their immune system, or have something like asthma or some condition like that that's going to make it even more difficult for them to breathe. And even those lower values on that AQI index are going to make it the air more unhealthy for them.
Great. So another one here. Seems like they're referencing the ASHRAE committee that you're on, but they're wondering
Yep.
what that entail, what lessons have been learning, and what changes have been made recently as opposed to the stuff that's already been in place.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is me being from a filter supplier and other people on there, the first, when the group first got together, especially, it's like, well, let's just throw filtration at it. Let's just filter it. But the more people started digging into this, and the more the EPA has done case studies, and the more prevalent that PM sensors have become implemented, and there's more data. The biggest change I've seen over the last 2 years is we're saying, okay, you have to have a system approach. You can't just throw filters at it. Like I said, probably 15 times, your system has to be airtight as much as possible. You have to shut down those, you have to look at you have to look at a bigger picture and not just the filters. The other thing is that, again, with all this data, we've seen how you can have this variability from within the same building and from different buildings that are near each other. And so again, it's the biggest lesson learned for me is you have to look at every building individually and come up with your own plan specifically for that building, because no two buildings really are the same.
The best engineered answer is it depends, right?
It depends. Yeah. Right.
So piggybacking off that, have you seen or have you noticed a general shift in the industry from that MERV 13 back to a more typical MERV 8? And
yeah, it's funny you say that. We just had a big internal meeting last week, and everybody was talking about that, how COVID hit, and obviously there were wildfire issues before COVID, and then COVID hit, and what I like to say, I don't think I coined this term, but as people got filter religion, all of a sudden everybody went, oh crap, I can't get by with the least expensive filter. I need a better filter. I don't need to keep this COVID out. And so everybody started upgrading to MERV 13 and better filters. And now we have this wildfire guidance, and we were saying the same thing, but what we're seeing is for those wildfire issues, people are migrating back down and going, okay, COVID's over. I can go back to my MERV 8, my MERV 9 filter, and I'm good to go. For a lot of people, they seem to think, maybe rightfully so, that COVID's in our rearview mirror, and so they're filter religion. So yes, we're definitely seeing that.
Understood. And there's a couple questions that came through regarding if the system can handle it, and you definitely touched on it from what I recall you saying. It's more or less that you might just have to change that filter more often.
Right.
Is that really what you're balancing? Is that I guess the pressure drop and the dust holding capacity?
Yeah. Because it's our feeling of as people on the committee, and it sounds kind of bad because I've come from a filter manufacturer. So like, yeah, just use that filter and throw it away before it's used up. It's easy for me to say. I'm not paying for it, but really, that the smaller particulate can get through less efficient filters. So if you put a higher efficiency filter in it that maybe has a 0.4, 0.5 pressure drop when it's clean, and you can run it up to an inch or inch and a half, maybe your filter that was in there could only go up to 7 or 8 tenths and then need to be changed out. But we feel for health, it's better to use that more efficient filter and change it out before you start to lose airflow, if that's the case.
Sure, makes sense. So there's also a couple questions here. I'm going to combine them a little bit, so
okay,
we can kind of cover them all, and it's based on the molecular side. So
okay.
The questions are basically going along the lines of, is there a specific carbon combination or a way to optimize that molecular additive, whether it's temporary or long term? And have you had any experience kind of specifically in that wildfire category?
Yeah, so in that I'm focused more on the gas phase business. It's kind of interesting. Gas phase, and I'm hopefully not biased just because that's what I do every day, but always takes a backseat to particulate filtration. It's just a fact of life. And I think a lot of that goes to, you can see particulate matter. You can look at a filter and see it getting dirty and dusty, and you can see particulate matter in the air when the sun comes in your house. You can see the, stuff floating around. You can't see gas phase contaminants. Maybe you can smell them, but you can't see them. And so people have a harder time wrapping their head around that, I think. So we always get people wanting higher efficiency filters for wildfire smoke. And I'd say it's less than 10-15% of the time somebody's also concerned about the gas phase side of it. So I'm always excited when somebody is, because I think you should use both. Not just because that's my job, but I think you should use both. And so typically just a virgin activated carbon, which the vast majority of chemical filters out there, that's all they are, is just virgin activated carbon. People tend to refer to those. I cringe a little bit, like, yeah, give me one of those charcoal filters. But that's basically what they're asking for, is just a carbon filter. That will go a long way to removing all the contaminants. That list I showed early on, some of those would require a different type of media, like a potassium permanganate impregnated alumina or impregnated activated carbon. But if you just use an activated carbon filter, you're going to, kind of like the 80-20 rule, you're going to get rid of most of those contaminants. So that would be better than doing nothing. But there isn't, maybe another way, if there isn't so far, maybe this is an opportunity for somebody, there isn't a wildfire smoke blend that I'm aware of on the market. But there is, people, sidebar, a cannabis blend. A lot of people have like fine-tuned for cannabis grow rooms, a blend of carbon and potassium permanganate that supposedly lasts longer. So maybe somebody will come up with a wildfire blend as well.
And those blends will specifically target whatever that chemical composition is, right? That's the
correct.
idea.
Like activated carbon's really good at removing VOCs, hydrocarbons, and ozone, which are and some other gases. And so that's a lot of what's just in outdoor air to begin with, whether there's a wildfire event going on or not. So even if there's not a wildfire event, you get the benefit of cleaner air in your building. That's
a beautiful thing. I'm going to give you one more just to kind of, and it's a good way to kind of wrap it up before I hand it back to Tony here. And some people asked it in different ways, but I think this one's worded well. It's, what strategy or strategies would you suggest to balance that indoor air quality, to address the smoke issues, the COVID issues, and keeping in mind that you're trying to make sure that the climate control in that building is still a top priority?
Yeah, so I'm going to steal your answer, Matt. It depends. So again, I hate to be wishy-washy. I think it depends on the building, but the idea is just generally speaking, is to reduce the outdoor air that you're bringing in, because that's going to be laden with smoke. And so you want to be able to minimize that. I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm doing a commercial, but if anybody's familiar with the IEQ procedure from ASHRAE 62, it allows you to, like, instead of bringing in more outdoor air, you can just recirculate and scrub the air and return to the space. So I think that's again, I'm a little biased, but I think that's a great policy too. If you have to reduce the outside air, then you definitely want some sort of chemical filter, gas phase filtration, to scrub the air as you're recirculating it, to remove the contaminants that are being generated indoors. So there's a balance there, and I don't think there's a one magic answer. I think it depends on the environment. But the other thing is portable air cleaners. The prices on those things, since they first really hit the market back during COVID, have really come down. They're very inexpensive now for a portable HEPA air cleaner. And so if you can't do anything else, I think putting one of those in a space is a great way to go. Because if you can only limit your outdoor air so much, and this air is getting in, then put one of those in to help scrub that. It's always best to keep it out of the building, but if it gets in the building, then you want to try to remove it as fast as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've heard some people from talking from ASHRAE is the better way to say it is clean ventilation as opposed to just ventilation. Right. And there's strategies, like you said, scrubbing that air that people use even before a lot of this became an issue, more on the energy side too. So there's a lot of different benefits.
That's correct.
That's great. All right. Well, hey, Dave, this is, I know you and I could talk about this for another hour or two. I'm gonna let other people go, but thank you so much. I appreciate you spending some time with us. I'm going to hand it back to Tony.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. Yep. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Matt, for moderating. A lot more where this came from. We put on some great conferences. We'll be going to Nashville this fall. So if you want to see experts like Dave speak in person about stuff like this, you should come to NAFA. At least check out our webinars. We have a lot of stuff on our website. We'll be launching a new website tomorrow. So go to nafahq.org. It'll look different tomorrow, but still some good stuff on there. And think about joining, but definitely think about engaging with us. We have this is the sort of stuff that we do. We want to educate the public, but also educate new business development and sales folks. I know if I look at the analytics of our site, I see a lot of engineers and building operations folks here. So again, the focus is air filtration and indoor air quality. So thanks to experts like this, we can provide that sort of education. So check us out. If you have any questions, you can email us at NAFA@nafahq.org or give us a call. You'll find us online. Thanks, guys. Another great webinar and a lot of folks attended, a lot of great questions. And we will see you on the next one. Take care.
That's good. Thanks, Dave.
All right.
Thanks, Tony.